Welcome to the candidate Q&A for the ITE 2025 ITE International Vice President election. My name's Steve Kusiemba, ITE Executive Director and CEO, and I have the privilege of interviewing our two amazing 2025 candidates. As a member, this is your opportunity to learn a little bit more about each candidate, hear about their goals and aspirations as ITE President, and to give us a little insight on their leadership and their own personality. The candidates' responses are impromptu. They were not provided with the questions in advance. For this recording, I'm excited to welcome Neelam Dorman, a planning manager with the Oregon Department of Transportation. Neelam, welcome. My first question is one that I often ask a member when I get the opportunity to have a conversation. Tell me a little bit about your early experiences with ITE. How did you get introduced? What were your early impressions, and what led you to actually become a member?
Steve, it's good to be here. Thank you for the time to talk about it. I think my IT experience started as many of our other members have done as a student and in a student chapter. I'm a proud graduate of the University of California, Irvine, and that's where things started for me. I was a junior at that point, and stumbled across it based on one of our transportation courses where that professor was the advisor, which I appreciated having that particular individual in the advisory position because they were definitely draw you in and motivated, and that makes all the difference at a student chapter. So that's kind of how I got started. My first impressions, I don't know that I could remember them. It's been a really long time. It's been a long time since I was a sophomore and junior in college, but it was mostly the people, right? I mentioned the professor, the advisor. He was definitely somebody who brought me in based on, oh, wow, transportation, very interesting. Hadn't quite declared that I was going to specialize in it, so wasn't anything too impressive about it. There was the interesting piece of when I really got involved, which was becoming student chapter president, where at that point our chapter wasn't doing very well. There was a few members, and part of his motivation to send me to my first ever district meeting coming into my senior year was to have me stack the board, as it were, to try to get some junior volunteers into the room. And so for me, it was fun to get to build something. And that's where I got hooked. I mean, I've always been a person who wants to serve, who wants to build things. And that's where my hook was, that we got to start it. And I will say, I mean, I did okay. My wonderful board and I did okay. But years later, serving on the section board, seeing how that student chapter flourished, nothing to do with me, I would say. I just sort of like put some structure into place. I don't take credit for that, but the students just kept it growing and made it something incredible. So for me, that's how I got in. And it really was just a community. It was a community of professionals, people who just had this common interest. And when you're in college, I think you just want to find that group of people. Now, I will say I was an ASCE as well. It wasn't that this was my only professional society, but it was just a group of specialty transportation nerds, and it just felt like home.
So since those early days, you've been involved in many different aspects of ITE. Tell us a little bit about your journey at the section and the district levels, and if you've been involved in any councils or committees.
I have been an ITE active member for a long time. It's been an incredible journey, I would say. I've gotten to serve from the student chapter level to my section in Southern California to the district of Western District, leadership positions, and I just finished my term as international director on their national board. It's been fun to serve in elected leadership positions. I think it's been an extraordinary learning experience for me personally. I think it's taught me skills that help me in my professional career more than any job would allow me to do. It's allowed me to take a lot more responsibility earlier in my career, and help me understand what it is to work with a group of volunteers. It makes a very big difference when you apply that philosophy to your colleagues and your agency partners to understand that they're all coming to the table to get something done. Um, I think the chair roles for me, both at the section and the district level, were the most exciting. I graduated, I shadowed our student chapter liaison and my local section for a year, and then I took that position over. And it was fairly new. I think as we've started the STEM chair position with all of our section in the past few years, it was at that point. So you really had ownership and you had the ability to evolve it. And that just created so much. We started a local traffic bowl that just was a fun event. There
Awesome.
was no big trophy associated with it, although I did make one. It was more for the enjoyment and an activity that the students could participate in. And then I got to do career guidance chair at the district level, which
Ah,
has a broader focus, not just students, but young professionals, people transitioning out of students into their careers. And that was a blast from getting to put these wonderful panels together. I was still a young professional back then. And so both a benefit to myself to get to build these relationships with these mentors and senior professionals, but to get to share that with students and young professionals as they're trying to make some big life choices, where to work, where to live, what area to focus in. So that was a really great experience. I honestly have not been involved at the council level, I think, as much. I've been a part of the planning council. I get their emails, I follow the materials that they put together, but have not been an active participant at that level. At the international committee level, been in a few. My most recent one, which has now been dissolved, was the one ITE
right.
task force that eventually became a committee. That one was really fun for the planner brain inside of me to put things on paper. But really, what I loved about the one IT community, it was very purpose driven. It was driven to help, to me at least, was to help make things easier for our volunteers, right? It was to put materials together that help you do your job uh, better and hopefully easier, and just have resources and tools of a broad range for those folks. I know for us, we're constantly growing, we're evolving, and there's always new leadership. So something as overwhelming yet simple as financial practices, getting to document that piece, having the resources of ITE staff to give you that broader perspective, and just the tool of having somebody to go to ask these questions, but putting it all together into something that's accessible to every member from the student chapter to the international level. That was a very fulfilling, both from a, I like to document things and write down our process procedures, but also just being able to create tools that are helpful to people.
So let's hit the big question next. Why do you want to be ITE International Vice President?
That is a good question to ask, especially since I'm running for ITE International Vice President. It has been an aspiration of mine for a long time. I would say once I started coming up in section leadership, it was something more back of the mind than a clear goal, mostly because I had mentors serving on the international board and in the International Executive Committee. So getting to see them, they're an inspiration for work. So they became also an inspiration with an ITE of something I wanted to accomplish. But as anybody who's ever served on XCOM or thought about running will tell you, which I have asked, it's always about the timing. It is a big commitment. It is a big role to step into. So the timing has to work out. For me, I'm lucky enough it works out in my personal life and I have the support of my family. But more importantly, I work for a public agency. I work for a larger public agency, the Oregon Department of Transportation. And I honestly did not consider running this time around because I was not sure that I would have that support. It's a difficult ask. My ask already to be an IBOD member, an international director, was tough, but I was already in the position. So it's more of a hiring negotiation rather than an outright ask. And I'm lucky I have the trust of my leadership, and it was a much easier conversation than I was ready. I was ready to have the deep conversation, and they were supportive, and that made all the difference for me. So timing wise, it definitely works out. And also the timing of having just rotated off the international board. I think if you would have said, well, I was a district officer, would I run for international? It would be still a question. I don't know what I'm running for. I didn't get to sit at that level and understand what's happening at the international level. So having served on IBOD this past 3 years has taught me a lot. I know what I'm getting into, so that's helpful to run for something where you
Yeah.
understand a little bit more. And I've had a great time serving with the folks on the boards. When you think timing, there is also something about knowing the people that are ahead of me on the executive committee and the people that are going to continue to serve that I have gotten to overlap with a year or two, a great group of people. So it'd be just fun to continue serving with them. I also have gotten to know ITE staff really well, and so that'll be fun to continue serving with the staff that is there. And last but not least, it's just I just want to continue being an ITE, and I think this is the natural next step for me. I will also say when I was having my big pro con list discussion with my husband of is it the right time for me to run, it definitely came up to where it works out timing wise. It's been a dream and an aspiration of mine. And it just continues to be a great organization to be a part of. So I'd like to get to see it from all levels. And career wise, I think, selfish, solely me career wise, what a great experience to have. On the previous question, I said I learned a lot getting to be an elected officer. Gosh, will I learn a lot getting to be an elected officer at the international level?
Great. So tell our members a little bit about your leadership style. What qualities will you bring to the ITE Executive Committee and ultimately as ITE International President?
Um, I would say my leadership style is definitely people focused. It's my working style as well. I think people is the entirety of what we do. There's a lot of technical things in our world, but a lot of it really comes down with how you work with people. So for me, both managing my team, working with a lot of external partners in the work that we do at Oregon DOT, and just sitting in the different rooms that I am lucky enough to get into to be in, such as with policymakers and in the political rooms, it really brings it all back down to being able to communicate with people, being able to share what you know and talk through things. So for me, that's how I approach most of what I do is to focus on the people aspect of it, and kind of bring in the technical as appropriate and learn how to communicate the technical to a variety of audiences. I think that's made a pretty big difference. So I sit in a role as planning manager. My team does current and long range planning. And my background is engineering. And one of the benefits of having that educational background and experience in operations with the planning group has been able to have both sides of the communication, right? I wouldn't say I'm an expert engineer or an expert planner. I just happen to be right in the middle to understand a little bit of both to be dangerous. And so for me, it's that ability to communicate with people that makes the difference in my day-to-day work. For the executive committee, I think each board member just solely brings a different perspective, a different life experience, professionally, personally, to the current board. If I were lucky enough to join the current executive committee, I think I bring a planner perspective that is different from the folks that are on there. I'll bring a large agency DOT perspective. Um, I guess more of a West Coast planning issues perspective and approach to the work that we do. And then, for me, I bring a different lived experience than others on the board would. So it just broadens the horizon. Um, as far as my kind of approach to joining the executive committee, and I know that wasn't exactly in the question, but for me, it's simply, again, being a member of that team. I have had exposure to those folks. I've gotten to work with them. Some only for a little bit, but I understand the relationships. I have relationships with them. So for me, it feels comfortable knowing that I'll be spending quite a bit of time with them, both in meeting rooms and traveling. And I hope to have that trusted relationship and sort of that team atmosphere of being able to cover for another when we need it and kind of share the workload and the responsibilities. I know for myself being a public agency member and having a public agency member on the board, currently it's not that easy to be able to be everywhere whenever. And so I do really appreciate the XCOM that's up there right now and the ability for us to divide and conquer.
So ITE is currently in the middle of our 3-year strategic plan right now, and one of the three main pillars is focused on membership. Are there elements of the current plan, or maybe something not in the plan, that you consider to be an opportunity area for ITE to further strengthen our value to members over the next few years?
I think ITE is doing really well. I'll start with that. I think we've done so well in growing our membership, and we're providing so many more services to our members. I think one of the things that I've mentioned before in my discussions has been continuing to leverage that virtual training and programming. It's such a great, coming from an agency that does not send a lot of people to conferences, the virtual component makes ITE value adds value to our membership as an agency. It definitely hits the PDH credits and whatnot, but it just allows, for me personally, I've been using the virtual ones to get people into a room. We're not quite back into the office environment, so being able to pull up a recording and just sit there, listen to it, learn from it, and have a group discussion is just invaluable. Another thing that I think we could do better would probably be integrating planners and engineers. And the planning initiative's been great. And I think we're going to continue evolving the work that we've done in there. For me, sometimes it's simply a function of having folks understand how a project evolves. I also think it's really critical for younger members. As we grow in our career, we get to see how things are done. We get to see the different tiers of what affects our day-to-day work. But I personally didn't know this when I was a young member, just starting out, how much policy and funding governs the day-to-day. You may not see it in the work that you're executing when you're just starting out, but it really makes a big difference. And a lot of that sits more in the planning realm rather than in the more transportation operations and engineering realm. So for me, integrating that piece of it and how it governs the work that we do, integrating the land use and transportation piece, that to me is the big deal. I do think that something that could bridge that gap would be partnerships with other organizations. We partner with so many, and we do a great job coordinating between the two, maybe at the international level more so than at the local. And at the local, it's very difficult. Yes, it's hard enough for all of us to show up to ITE events, let alone then trying to create new ones with APA or WTS or all of the other organizations that are competing for our attention in this industry. But some of that learning, I finally went to my first APA conference. I got to do a great presentation about recruiting and hiring for the APA younger members. And so for me, having that experience brought together, one of the things I mentioned in my election materials was continuing to leverage the virtual trainings and seeing if there is a partnership piece with another organization. I'll use APA since that's the realm I work in. APA members will be APA members. They have their reasons for it, both for just a preference, their specialty, or their license is within that organization. But if those members can access our webinars at a lower cost, it may also give us the opportunity to get some APA members to be more involved in ITE without having to become members, because let's face it, most companies will not pay for two memberships, mine included. So being able to kind of bring them in would be really helpful to get more people involved. And then the last thing I'll mention is STEM. The entire reason I am here from high school on was STEM programming. I happened to be in school and I happened to be good at math and science, and I happened to have one of my teachers turn me on to a summer STEM program that led to a special class in high school that had a STEM focus, specifically MESA. MESA is a wonderful organization, Math, Engineering, Science Achievement. It brought me into this world, and that drew me into transportation. Eventually, took a while to get there, but it drew me in there. So I think linking to organizations already in place, like MESA, it's around the country, not in every state. They program on college campuses, so it's really easy to connect our student chapters to them. And they do local activities. So from a local section perspective, it's not having to create something, but having an opportunity to get more involved in your local community, in your local schools with STEM activities. That to me would be just such a great link. And to do that at the international level, I think helps. So if you were to link
Yeah.
ITE with MISA at the national, it would be the national level. To then create that partnership and relationship, it makes it easier for the sections and the districts to connect through. And then I'll just end with one of my most favorite STEM activities is WTS's Girls Engineering Day. It doesn't happen everywhere in the country where WTS exists, but what a fun event. Just makes me so happy to be a part of it and get to share something that we're interested in with, elementary, middle school kids. It's just
Right.
such a fun experience. And I hope that ITE can spend a little bit more time in that world.
Our strategic plan also emphasizes the opportunity to influence a stronger safety culture. And just this month, at the beginning of the year, we released our new safety roadmap and action plan. I know it just came out and you may not have had a chance to read through all of it in detail, but were there any initiatives that stood out to you? Were there any things that you felt particularly strong about?
I haven't had a chance to read it all, but I have been following it along as it's been going. I do appreciate the way you phrase that question. Safety culture, I think that's kind of the crux of the conversation. So I'm just going to focus on that for just a second before I talk about a little bit more of the details of the roadmap. But I think with anything, and especially safety, we can all agree that it is important. That's the first level of buy-off. The second level, I think, is to understand that everybody needs to understand what that means. So it needs to be reflected in our policies. So our policymakers need to be championing this topic. Our community needs to understand it and champion it. And then all levels of the work that we do within our firms and agencies need to also prioritize it. Um, and that is sort of down all levels. I think it's easy to say that leadership at any big company and or small local agency can say, yes, safety is a priority. But that needs to reflect down in every team within that agency. For me personally, I think about, planning can say it, we can write it in a policy, we can do public outreach, button it up, and it looks great. But until it's internalized in our day-to-day practices, down to our like maintenance teams, right? If safety can sometimes mean a trade-off with maintenance, may mean more maintenance, and that brings a conversation of that team into it to where it needs to be a priority for everyone, and that message needs to be repeated. I also think when we think about safety, sometimes we think point source, right? It's this particular improvement. We shall at this intersection do X, Y, and Z, and that is the picture. There's of course a bigger picture. We are not the safety everything solution makers. We are one piece of it. Enforcement, education, public health, all of that pulls into it. So we want to make sure that we aren't the end all be all, and reflecting that, I think, in the roadmap and in our learning picture is a full understanding of the scope of what's needed. And then kind of pulling on that bigger picture, thinking about resiliency and emergency response, of course, a big topic in today's current events. So bringing that into the picture of safety is a big deal. And I think the last overarching point I'll say is metrics matter, metrics and statistics, the way we track things, which I really appreciate as part of the roadmap is the learning part of it, the professional development, the technical resources piece really matters. If those metrics are not correctly set up, both in our design standards, in our performance measurements, I think that's a huge deal in my small world of the work that we do. Is if a performance measure is not only measured in throughput and not safety, then that changes the whole dynamic of what I'm able to justify, how I'm able to prioritize something. And to be able to build all of that into our cost benefit analysis, our funding priorities. It just requires a depth of involvement that isn't just one group. My my biggest, I guess, excitement about the safety roadmap is actually the tier talking about learning early. So the student engagement, student learning piece of it. That's We talk about buy-off, we talk about community understanding. How lovely is it to start it at that level? I will personally say I don't think safety was it was in the learning that I had, but never emphasized. So to change that as a picture for our current and upcoming generation of transportation professionals will really help it move forward. And then I'll just end with the same technical resources. ITE is a technical organization. It started in a way to be a tool for our members and the professionals in our industry. So for me, that is a great place for us to be. I think it's a great path for us to follow. And I'm glad that we're, as with the other things like the MUTCD plan that we had to make sure we were providing resources for our members. I think the roadmap to me really emphasizes where IT fits into the bigger picture of the safety conversation.
So my final question is a little bit more about you. We are all shaped by what happens beyond work and beyond ITE. Can you tell us a little bit more about you as a person? What do you like to do when you're not focused on transportation issues?
I will start by saying that my husband has deemed ITE as my hobby. We've had this discussion, so I will say it's not focused on transportation, but it is an avenue for service for me, and it's a volunteerism avenue for me. So I do spend a lot of time on ITE stuff that I don't count as work time. Um, but for me, I am a very, I feel like work is quite a lot, big part of your day to day, your 8, 10 hours a day. So in the weekends, I'm more of I just want to relax. I'm lucky enough to live in a beautiful place. So not currently, the weather is not inviting enough to want to be out and about into the lovely hiking trails in our neighborhood, but that is something I enjoy, just having some piece of that. I love food. So I tend to explore a lot of restaurants, but honestly, once we moved, I just moved here to Portland, Oregon from Southern California about 3 years ago. I have a much nicer kitchen than my previous home. So I do a lot of cooking, and that's been just a fun thing for me to do at the end of a work day. It's both explores my range and my skill set, but also it's just sort of a fun cool down off of a long day. And more than anything, I've just enjoying reading because the weather has changed. I don't read as much over summer when it's quite beautiful in the Pacific Northwest, but and for me, reading, I would say I'm a leisurely reader, looking at things in the realm of fiction. But I did just pick up Crucial Conversations, aiming to better myself as a communicator and a manager. It's a decent book, but I look forward to the class. I'm not sure I absorb the information from a book as I would by a wonderful executive coach that'll be kind of leading that class coming up in the next year for me. But yeah, that's kind of a little bit about myself. And for background of just who I am, I was not born here. I grew up in Southern California. I was born in the beautiful Fiji Islands. I moved here as a child, and was lucky enough to end up in Southern California, which provided me a lot more opportunities than would have been back home, both for my own personal education and growth. But I think just exposure and learning, if you're tying it back into the world of
Right.
transportation, it just was a great, somewhat overwhelming experience. I remember, imagine being 9 years old and landing at LAX and never been on a plane. When you talk
Yeah.
about having to internalize
Mind
what it
blown.
means. So that is definitely something that I think, when you sit down and you think about how did I end up here? How did I end up in the world of transportation? I think some of that personal history and experience of just being somewhere different. I just was in Fiji last month, and silly enough, I took a lot of pictures of transportation signs, and our ad hoc roundabouts in Fiji are quite interesting. I shared it with my wonderful design engineers in the ODOT Technical Center and said, let me know which of our design metrics this roundabout meets. And um, but see, it's so hard. I went home to
Yeah.
visit family and I couldn't get transportation out of my mind. It sort of made its way into every part of my life. So, yeah, hopefully that gives you a little bit about me. I have a very small household. It's me, my husband, and my dog. And I am lucky enough, though, that I have lovely friends and family who like to visit me after I supposedly abandoned them in Southern California and moved to a different state. But I'm working on slowly attracting them to the beautiful state of Oregon and
Mhm.
city of Portland. So that's an endeavor, an active endeavor that takes up some of my time, or those long conversations of why some of my best friends should move here.
Well, thank you, Neelam. It's wonderful getting to know you more and affording the opportunity for our members to get to explore your candidacy a little bit further. And to our members, I make this simple plea. Please remember to vote in the election. All voting members will receive their ballots electronically via email on or about February 5th, and the voting will close on March 5th. If you do not receive a ballot, please check your spam filter, and if it's still not there, reach out to a member of ITE staff. Your vote is important. Your voice needs to be heard. So thank you all and have a wonderful 2025.